What's going on, everybody? This is Randall Barnes, the founder of HBCU Pulse and host of HBCU Pulse Radio, in the building for another special edition of the show. On today, man, week one of the football season was a lot, and we're going to try to get to as much as we can on this show. And then, of course, we're recording after the Jackson State FAMU game, so we got a lot to say about that. I have Arielle in the building. Arielle, how you doing today?
I'm trying to find my sense, my brain, because this week one, like you said, was just a lot. A lot of surprises, a lot of upsets, a lot of teams that I wasn't looking at that now I have to look at because they weren't on my radar at first.
Let's talk about it. So the Orange Blossom Classic, Florida A&M FAMU beat Jackson State 28-10. This is FAMU's first win in the Classic since it came back in 2021. Jackson State really did not have a great offensive showing. They had to change quarterbacks. So in the third quarter, they changed to Zy McDonald, and Zy McDonald actually was more productive than Jason Brown. He threw for 149 yards of 10 of 14 passing. He threw one touchdown, and he scored that touchdown in the fourth quarter, and that made us think that it might be a comeback situation going on. But it didn't happen, and FAMU won, and they're in the driver's seat in the SWAC East. So I got to ask you, Arielle, what are you thinking about this game? And where do we go from here at this point?
I was just in shock that TC Taylor allowed Jerry Musa three touchdowns. They were 0-21 by the end of the first quarter going to the second. So this Jackson State team, how everyone is looking at this weekend is like, this is not who we saw in the Me at SWAC Challenge. This isn't the same team that blew South Carolina State out of the water. So I was honestly trying to figure out what happened, and Brown was not the productive quarterback that Jackson State wanted. I think during the game and most of the discussions, they were discussing a hand injury just because FAMU's defense were dogs, attacking the play, rushing the quarterback, closing the pocket. And I'm actually glad they got this win. And just to recall in last week, this win was really, really important because just like Central had just with Howard, this win will determine who is actually making it, who will be the top at the end of their conference. I mean, of course, you have your SWAC East and West. They'll be able to go against each other and maybe possibly again. But that one loss, if Jackson State loses to any other team, that can actually rearrange their season. Maybe they actually might be second. And that would be kind of weird because we're used to Jackson State dominating. They're the SWAC champions 2 times in a row. They finally want to win a Celebration Bowl after going back-to-back years. So this is not the greatest start that TC Taylor wanted to see. I think this is a good start for FAMU. I hate how they lost momentum. Why was there no production after the second half? And that's the thing that kind of scares me. Just because you come up on a team that has beat you down by 1 point and then beat you down by 56 points in the previous year, you still have to show rigorous work and determination and talent throughout the whole game. There can't be a pause because Southern is not going to let you pause. As we've seen this weekend, Prairie View is not going to let you pause. Alabama State is not going to let you pause. There are a lot of teams that saw today that FAMU is good, but once they get in their heads and once they get up there, maybe we can attack and come to them. I don't think that's what I would have loved to see. So the performance was good by FAMU, but at the same time, there were still disappointments on both sides that this wasn't the most competitive nor revealing game. All it showed me was Jackson State can still make it, and FAMU still has a little bit of work to do.
On radio, right, Arielle? So one of the things I learned about radio and podcasting and audio is that you got to be real, on the radio and in audio, because it's like, people can see us now on YouTube and all these different places, but they hear you, they're listening to what you're saying. So I was always taught to be real in radio, and I'm gonna be real right now. I turned this game off. I turned this game off by about the second quarter. I didn't watch halftime. I turned to the Morehouse, Virginia Union game because I wanted to see Jada Byers' production. And I still had it on. I had it on my laptop on the big screen. It was Morehouse and Union on NFL Network. But just my thoughts on this game. First and foremost, I think that when it comes to sports conversation, we talk in general as sports fans, we talk in absolutes. I think it's, this team is good or this team is bad because of this performance. I think that there can be nuance. I still think Jackson State is going to be a really good team, and this was their first test. Like every game was not going to be like last year where they went undefeated in conference. Like they lost this game. Good teams lose games. I still think that TC Taylor is an effective coach. I still think that they have a lot of great talent, but it is a long season. It is just the start of September. It is a Labor Day weekend. The season effectively ends on December the 16th at the Celebration Bowl. I did not like what I saw from Jackson State. It seemed as if they changed their offensive philosophy a little bit. We saw they switched up their quarterbacks to Zy McDonald. We don't know if maybe he'll get the starting nod over Jason Brown, or they were trying to experiment and give Zy McDonald and also the other quarterback some time to see what they can do. But I still think that Jackson State is going to have a good season. And I said on last week that FAMU was going to win this game. I thought it would be a closer game, but I think that Jackson State is going to make it to the FCS playoffs. I do think that Jackson State is going to have a productive year. This is the first loss, and I don't think that they're going to lose any other game at this point. I think that they're going to flip and switch places with FAMU. I think that Texas State game, after how they beat Baylor, I'm sort of shaky on that now. That might be a toss-up, but maybe Jackson State surprises me on that upset. But I think they flip places with FAMU from 2021. FAMU goes to the Celebration Bowl, and Jackson State goes to the FCS playoffs. So all I really saw, from Jackson State, for me, is it seemed as if their offensive philosophy was changed. Like you said, they didn't adjust well to FAMU's defense. FAMU came out ready to tackle, ready to hit. They really want this game. From that Marcus Riley 96-yard touchdown run kick return, like when he did that, I already knew. I'm like, yeah, FAMU won this game, because it's a totally different energy that I didn't see Jackson State. Although they got in the red zone the next possession, I did not see Jackson State match that energy. And FAMU wanted this more, in my opinion. I know it's hard to quantify, but it seemed like FAMU wanted this win more than Jackson State, because we got to go to off the field. This is FAMU's last time in the Orange Blossom Classic because they pulled out. Yeah, they're going to play Jackson State again because they're in the same division. They're in the SWAC now, so they're going to play again, but it's going to be later in the season. So they're not going to be in the Orange Blossom Classic again. So this game might not even be on ESPN. It might be on ESPN Plus. It might be on HBCU Go. We don't know. So this is a really big stage. It's a really big atmosphere. It's on ESPN. It's in Hard Rock Stadium, an NFL stadium, for crying out loud. So I think FAMU was like, we're not going to go 0-3 in this classic, so we're going to cash in. And how I look at FAMU and how they played, like I said, this is my winners of the SWAC. And I wasn't really ambitious here. I wasn't like, I picked out a diamond in the rough. No, they were the number one team in the preseason rankings, in the SWAC East. So this isn't an ambitious pick, but that run game really showed me everything I needed to know about how FAMU is going to do this season. They had 207 total rushing yards, 5.2 yards per carry. You had Jackson State that didn't have a run game to speak of. And I think that spoke to why things were the way that they were. And then you look at Terrell Jennings, Jaquez Yant, like those running backs. You had Jennings 75 yards on 11 carries, Yant 72 yards on 11 carries. That run game really powered them. And I think that put them on the track to win, because Jackson State couldn't do anything with them. Like they were running through them, like they were getting to the red zone, like they were making things happen. And I got to say this one last thing. I think that I saw something on FAMU's offense that's going to really be interesting as we move into the rest of the year. I'm really looking at Jameer Sheard. Jameer Sheard, the senior wide receiver for FAMU. I think that he's going to be a suitable replacement for Xavier Smith. So Jameer Sheard, he had 44 receptions, 583 yards, 3 touchdowns on last season. This game, he had 90 yards on 5 catches and 1 touchdown, including a 68-yard, touchdown type situation. So I think that he is going to be the heir apparent to Xavier Smith. So what I saw was a possibility of a balanced offensive attack and an aggressive defense. I really don't know how FAMU is going to be stopped this year.
Well, I still stick to my comments last year, and just to echo the game, it's hard to have a running game without Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter was a big portion, a really big part of Jackson State. And if you can't pass If every receiver is blocked or you're not getting down the field the way that you need to, yes, your running game is important. And that's the one thing that Jackson State lacks and something that they are going to have to fill in. But I don't even think that was the problem. And also, to go back to your point before I continue, I still think Brown is their quarterback. I just think it will, his injury, if there is an injury, because he was playing with his hand a lot during this game, will determine if backups and other quarterbacks need to be tested without the rest of the season. I still think he's their number one guy. This just wasn't his game. He wasn't looking down the field. He wasn't paying attention to obvious open man every single play. And I think that frustrated TC Taylor from the previous week till now, because not to have a consistent quarterback, we saw that with South Carolina State, is not a good thing to have in the beginning of your season. So I still think that's him, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to try to fill Travis Hunter's spot. But to go back to FAMU, their running game wasn't bad. Jennings, 11 carries, 75 yards. That's really, really good. But I think it was the fact that Jeremy Musa knew that Jackson State isn't as dominant defensively, nor are they pressuring him that much, that he was able to soar through the air. Having an arm against Jackson State, like I said, was going to be super, super important. And most of his touchdowns did not come from the running game. It came from his wide receivers and his tight end. So the fact that he has weapons and good wideouts this season is going to change everything for him. The running game was solid. It wasn't the best thing, that I saw. It wasn't the greatest. It was essential, and it carried them down the field when needed. But special teams and that offense with his wideouts were the main thing that carried him through that game. Not saying that everything else wasn't important. How FAMU came together collectively everywhere, especially special teams. It has to be special teams. Block field goal, block punt, kickoff returns, all of that. Special teams won this game. And if anybody wants to take a crack at the book, Central, you want to take a look. Howard, you want to take a look. Southern, you want to take a look. Alcorn State, you want to take a look. Special teams is where FAMU is finna have everybody. Special teams won that game for FAMU, and having those wideouts and that tight end won for them. Their ground game was really, really good, which we knew was going to have to be good if they were going to play against Jackson State. But to win at Jackson State, you have to put the ball in the air, have to throw it downfield, and they were throwing it 60 yards, 70 yards. Jerry Musa was not scared of them, especially when it came to the fourth quarter, besides all the penalties and the block kick. Once FAMU decided they just didn't want to play anymore because they were up 18 points. Why not? But at the end of the day, I have my reservations. I don't think, and I still stand by, Jackson State is going to be as great, not just because this is a rebuilding year. I don't see it for them. This is just something that I hope TC Taylor goes back to the locker room. It's just like, hey, this is what happened. This is where we need to be. Brown, I need you to get your head together. The only person that really played was Mulligan. Mulligan was the only one that played throughout all four quarters, first half and second half, and that carried them most part into the red zone. It wasn't anybody else. Everybody else had given up on the game. So Mulligan cannot be the only player that plays next week. It has to be the whole team. And whatever quarterback is coming out next week has to be more productive than what Brown was today on the field.
So let's move on, Arielle, to the headlines of the weekend. So it was a lot that went on in college football in general, but especially in the HBCU world. So we're going to just go back and forth and just exchange our headlines of the weekend. And I'm going to start, all right? So listen, I got to start with this, y'all. Arielle was right. She was 1,000% right about Howard University. I never doubted it. I never doubted it at all. I just had to see how Howard was going to perform. But Howard is like that. Howard is going to be a problem in the MEAC because how they played an FBS opponent in Eastern Michigan University, an FBS opponent that wasn't a scrub. They were good last season. And Howard, yeah, they started off rough in the first half, but they made a comeback in the second half. You outscored that FBS opponent 14-3 in the second half, and you could have won. That's next level to me. I think that when they get into MEAC play, they are going to be dangerous. Like Eden James, son of an NFL star. He is that guy. 96 yards on 9 carries, and he had a 50-yard run in the first quarter. And the thing about it, and I tweeted this, that Eden James, if he stayed in, Arielle, I think Howard might have won. I honestly think Howard might have pulled out the win if Eden James stayed in, because that running attack is really what powered them in the second half. Like, they weren't really throwing it like that. The passing game wasn't really effective, but that run game, they were going crazy. You had Ian Wheeler, 58 yards on 7 carries. Casey Hawthorne, 47 yards on 7 carries, had a rushing touchdown. And then he also was a productive receiver. He had 37 yards on 3 catches and a passing touchdown. So, like, then that second half, I saw resolve, because it could have got ugly. It really could have, because Eastern Michigan was pouring it on like an FBS team is supposed to against an FCS opponent. But Howard showed resolve. They almost pulled it off. I wanted it so bad. I want them to win so badly. I didn't have money on the game. I just wanted it for pride. I just wanted to say an HBCU beat a PWI. But it didn't happen like that. And, it is what it is. But Howard is going to be really good this year, Arielle. You called it. And November the 11th, when North Carolina Central and Howard play, it's going to be must-see TV. And I want to say this too. Morgan State and Howard is going to be must-see TV as well.
Like I told you before we got on, I was super I love being right, but it scares me where I'm close to being right. Of course, I agree with you that FAMU was going to beat Jackson State. But for Howard to come this close to Eastern Michigan after what happened last year was absolutely nonsense. I wasn't thinking, I at least thought that maybe they would put 10 points on the board. To be that close to winning against a PWI changes. I believe that broadcast probably experienced more views when they saw how close they were getting to be Eastern Michigan than because mostly when you see us play things like Vanderbilt or playing Harvard or just any HBCU playing an out of conference team, that we're most of the times like you saw with when we think about A&T and them playing UAB. Unfortunately, the loss that we did not want and the blowout that we were not expecting, I was right on that too. That UAB won, and I didn't want to be right on that one. I wanted to be proven wrong. But when you see teams like that, you think of far and away scores like that. But for Howard to flip this situation and to show that we have the defense that can hang with Eastern Michigan, we definitely have the offense that can put points on the board against them. This just changed my entire view of how their season is going to look. And I think out of all the teams in the MEAC, this might be the most challenging competition before we get to that Morgan State game that Central may have along the road, because Howard has a chip on their shoulder from tying, but still coming second to them last season. I didn't get to watch the game. I was able to watch the highlights, but Randall, I am just as in shock and as proud, even though they didn't beat this team, just as proud to see that an HBCU this weekend on week 1 so close to beating Eastern Michigan. That makes me happy, and I'm super proud of them, that win or lose.
Arielle, so what was your headline? What were one of the things that you were looking at this weekend?
There were so many upsets, but I think the one that really just blew my mind, that when I saw it, I said, hold on. What did I miss? Was Morgan State and Richmond. Off of a fumble recovery, you score against Richmond to win. That is the most Cinderella story that I have ever heard in a very long time, especially coming from an HBCU. That game, just going back and look at it on paper, it just seemed really, really bland, going blow for blow, trying to go back and forth. They were tied for a really long time until that third quarter fumble was I didn't think Morgan State, personally to me, Morgan State, they're not a bad team, but they are in their rebuilding years. They're not as great as they used to be. But off of a fumble recovery, I never would have thought that would have been the way that they win. And I like I said, I have no words, but that was the game of the weekend for me. Really tough game played. I think their running back Davis had a lot to do with getting them down the field. But I mean, the upset with Prairie View, I didn't think Prairie View, I thought Prairie View was going to win. That was my pick, but I had no hope in them from them to come out of it. Alabama State was always going to be Southern to me. I know you thought differently, but Morgan State against Richmond to me had to be that MEAC game of the week. What do you think, Randall? We both shared this headline because I just thought it wasn't possible.
Yeah, for me, you touched on it all the way, is that I didn't expect for Morgan State to beat Richmond because Richmond is one of the better teams in the FCS. Like they're one of the top teams in the CAA. And fun fact, like they were the number one passing offense in the CAA. Like they were passing for 282 yards a game last season. So, like I said, the fact that Howard competed with Eastern Michigan, who were a good FBS team, the fact that you have Richmond, they lost to Morgan State, and Richmond was a good FCS team, really great FCS team that really was competitive, that made the playoffs. I just think that says a lot about the competitiveness of where HBCUs are, and also the play of the MEAC, because they're able to match up with these other conferences and get wins. And what I really saw was the defense from Morgan State. Like they didn't really overpower Richmond with their offense. It wasn't like an offensive shootout. It was really the defense. Because you look at Morgan State, they only had 99 passing yards and 114 rushing yards. So wasn't great. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, they just had 300 yards. It was just super duper crazy. No, it was really a quiet game offensively. But you look at how they pressured Kyle Wickersham, the red shirt sophomore quarterback for Richmond, sacked him 5 times. Like, I thought he took a nap how many times they sacked him. Like, golly, he was just on the ground the whole game. 5 sacks. So, they played aggressive defense against him. They really disrupted that passing attack. But the thing about it is that when you look at the stats, he had a good statistical game. He was 23 for 30 in his passing, threw for 169 yards, but he threw an interception, no touchdowns. So the fact that Morgan State was able to hold them to that low of a passing number and no passing touchdown, you had Wickersham that ran for a 1-yard rushing touchdown to put him on the board. I just think that says a whole lot to me. And then on the defensive side, when it comes to the running the ball, 95 yards, they couldn't get nothing going. So you had to have, Wickersham throw the ball that much. That's why his passing numbers look so good, because the run game didn't work. So Morgan State really gave a formula, especially against these FCS teams that have high-powered offense. You got to stop that run game, force them to have to pass the ball, force them to have to beat you in the air, and see what they can do. They might they might not. And Morgan State made history. Because here's the thing they did. I talked about it on Clutch Points in my recap article. They made history because they broke Richmond's home game win streak they've had since 2006. They've won every opening game at home since 2006. 17 straight games. Morgan State said, not no more. It's a new day. It's a new time. We got new iPhones. We got MacBooks. We got new presidents. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a wrap. You know what I'm saying? Like you did that during the Bush administration. You in the Biden administration at this point. You know what I'm saying? So it was crazy. It was crazy at this point. So listen, I'm very proud of Morgan State. I think that they're going to be a monster. I think that we really have our top teams. To me, in the MEAC, I think that North Carolina Central has to stand out because they're legit. But Howard and Morgan State are the new standard bearers. It's not South Carolina State anymore. What we see is not South Carolina State. It is Morgan State and it is Howard, and those three are going to be who's battling for the MEAC championship.
I completely agree with you there. I don't see Delaware State doing anything right now, despite their loss this season. I know that there's them and South Carolina State are still trying to show that they are at least in the MEAC, like they're visible, like we can look at them, and then after we notice them, then maybe there'll be competition. But I completely agree with you. Between Morgan State, Howard, and Central, those are the 3 teams that are going to dominate the MEAC right now. Now I also see you have this Hampton and Grambling game on here. From what I've been hearing and peeking through and stuff, Grambling looks like the same old Grambling from last year. You got to tell me about this game because I don't see what you're seeing right now. What's the tea that I'm missing?
So I think what everyone's missing with this Grambling game is that yes, they lost. They definitely did lose. Okay, they ain't uncovering that up. But I think they really should have won. They had the opportunity to. They struck first in the game. They scored first. But Miles Crawley, who was at Alabama State, he's now at Grambling. He threw for 311 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 25 of 38 passing. He did everything he could do to get his receivers in the position to score, to move the team down the field. It was a high-scoring game. It was 45-41. It was a high-scoring game that Hampton just won. It was a shootout. Hampton did it. So, you can't take that away from them. But I think that what happened with Grambling was this. I think their defense is really what hampered them. Because the offense, you can't do no more. If you're throwing for 311 yards, what more can I do? I passed the ball 38 times. I was successful on 25 of them. What more can I do at this point? Because you got to look at it like this. The defense gave up 279 rushing yards overall. You had two Hampton players that had over 100 yards rushing. You had Christopher Zealous, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns, 15 carries. Then you had Darian Butts, 103 yards, 1 touchdown on 14 attempts. That's not how you win games. I think that's the reason why Grambling lost. If you have Sundiata Anderson that's going out there making it happen, if his draft stock rising on NFL Network, and you have the rest of the defense, the secondary, the defensive line, if you have them hold Hampton a little bit, I'm not saying render them scoreless, but I'm saying hold them a little bit. Don't let them be as successful moving the ball down the field. Make it more challenging to score. I think that Grambling might win this game, but Grambling is not going to be successful if Miles Crawley has to put up 300 yards a game. It's going to look good maybe for his draft stock, for him to get an award, but that's not going to be a winning recipe for them to win in the West. Because I think that with Southern losing, that Alabama State game was not an in-conference game. I'm looking at Southern real different. I'm talking about that in a second. But I think that the West is wide open. It might be FAMU and Jackson State and Alabama State, but the West is wide open, especially after this week. So Grambling can get up there. They just have to figure out what that defense is because they got to stop the run. If they don't stop the run, it's going to be a totally different ballgame for me. And that really leads me to the games to watch this week because we got Southern. They're playing Jackson State this weekend. And you have Jackson State that just lost to FAMU. So I honestly am not sold on Southern. I watched the same game you watched, and I thought that Southern really was going to be FAMU and Southern. I don't see it anymore. To be honest, I don't want to hop off the ship too much. I'm not going to say they're out of it, but I think that, Alcorn, of course, they play, against the FBS team. So, when you look at that, it's I don't think that's the great indicator of how good the Alcorn's going to be, especially the fact they weren't successful. But I'm just looking at Southern real crazy because they had to put their faith in their new quarterback, Harold Blood, to power them to the win. And it really didn't pay off because Blood threw for 166 yards, 1 touchdown. He got the opening touchdown to start the game and everything like that. But he also threw 2 interceptions, including that crucial interception at the end of the game that really stopped all comeback hopes because it was still a game. You move that ball down the field, you got, 4 shots, to go for a touchdown. So they could have very well won that game because Alabama State really wasn't being dominant offensively. But I think Alabama State's defense had them flustered. I mean, we got to remember Alabama State's defense was number 2 in the conference behind Jackson State because the specter of Jackson State, it detracted from everybody under them. So Alabama State was a very aggressive defensive team last year, and I don't think that they've lost anything. And there was really, once again, I think this is a theme of the weekend, there was no rushing attack to speak of. They only rushed for 69 yards, 2.6 yards per attempt. Southern, that's not how you're going to win. And here's the thing. The first week is sloppy. There was some good games. There was some great games overall in college football this weekend. But listen, the first week, I understand it's some jitters. It's things that have to be worked out. The team you are now is not going to be the team that you are in week 5. But my thing is, I just expected them to be a little bit more composed. I expected them to be a little bit better than what they were. And I'm looking at them crazy. And I honestly think that Jackson State is going to win on next week. Jackson State, talking about a chip on the shoulder. Jackson State started out dominant, beating South Carolina State. Then they lose in sort of a pathetic fashion a little bit, got to be honest, to FAMU. So now it's they don't want to get out the race. They want to still be around. Because who's to say that FAMU does win out? Who's to say that they don't lose a game or two? Who's to say the game against Alabama State doesn't beat them? So now it's a toss-up. Jackson State can win the rest of their games. FAMU might lose another game in conference, and especially in the division. And now you have Jackson State that's right back where they were in the SWAC championship. It's that close. It's a week-by-week thing. So we don't know. We don't know if FAMU will win every game. So Jackson State still knows we got to hold on because we still want to prove that we can be good. Yes, we lost our first conference game since we had Deion Sanders. So, yeah, we know that. But at the same time, we still hang around and be good. So I think that Jackson State is going to win next week against Southern. And to be honest, I always say a touchdown or a field goal. With this one, I don't think it's close. I think that Jackson State comes out and gets off their frustration and said, oh, y'all sleeping on us? Bet. And they just go crazy. I think it's like 14 points or more that they're going to beat Southern by, to be honest. So that's the game I'm watching. I'm honestly thinking that Jackson State is going to beat them down next week from what I saw this past week from Southern.
That that's a really bold prediction. Look, you feeling yourself. I'm letting you have it. You know what? I do agree with you. I do not think Southern is going to win this next game and possibly your Jackson State versus Southern. I do think they probably will dominate, but they just have to get past this FAMU loss. It's not the end of the world. Of course, it's not like you lost to a team that isn't good. Like that's not it. You lost to a team that was really good and that was just ready for you and that was tired of being beaten by you almost 3 years in a row. That's it. It is, and it's a rivalry. That's the best rivalry that they have. So it's I think Southern will probably lose to Jackson State, and hopefully Jackson State does recover from this.
But Arielle, listen, game that you're watching, it's a lot of games going on this weekend. What game are you really looking at?
Well, mine is kind of easy because for some odd reason, all the classics want to happen so early, and I don't know why it surprises me. My game of the week is the Aggie Eagle Classic, and you know what? Of course, Central beat out Winston-Salem State this past weekend. It was 47-21. I mean, what else did you expect? He is the most dominated quarterback that we have in the MEAC. To be honest, the most dominated quarterback that I believe in the HBC realm right now. No offense to Jeremy Musa, but I'm just saying Davis Rich is just a little bit more accurate and a little bit more consistent. That's all I have to say. This will be a rematch for us. As everybody knows, last year, that wasn't the best performance, nor did it feel good being beaten by rivals that we are no longer in competition with. A&T has just entered into their new season to the CAA, so that is kind of nice, and they have lost their first game, but we're still rooting for them. Hopefully this is the game that they could come back and actually try some things different. I think the one thing that really, really got them against UAB is their defense. Their defense has not been great these past 2 years. And I don't know if it's because we don't have the guys. We don't have anybody big. We don't have anybody powerful anymore. Most of our guys are actually really small. I believe the weight room is very essential, guys. That's how you win games. You got to put on that weight. And A&T has not been that sufficient. On our offensive side, we always had the players and we had a good recruiting class. It's just learning how to use them. Everybody's still trying to develop with each other. We're still trying to develop with our quarterback. So this is the game to watch. Hopefully they redeem themselves. And of course, this is necessarily not going to count against Central, whether they win or lose. It's mostly about bragging rights. And it's about, hey, we are the most dominant team now in the MEAC, and I can give that to Central. But this is my game to watch to see if A&T can still prove that they're dominating. Obviously, this is still going to be a really good game. It's one of my favorite games to watch. I love a good rivalry game. So that is my game of the week.
So those are two games that we're really looking at. But of course, it's more games on this weekend. And listen, we're gonna be way more consistent. Like that was the preseason, what things were in week 0, and we'll let week 1 be what it was because we had to see how things played out. So we're gonna put down starting week 2. We're gonna put down these picks of what we're right and what we're wrong about. So let's go on and get started with our quick picks. So let's start with the D2s versus D1. So Howard versus Morehouse. I got Howard in this game. Who you got, Arielle?
I got Howard. I just finished this Virginia Union and Morehouse game. I'm so sorry, Morehouse. They beat you down. I'm going with Howard.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. Like Howard played way tougher competition this past week. So I think they're going to be ready for this game and they have something to prove. So I don't think it's going to even be like how it was last year. So Bethune-Cookman versus Savannah State. I think this is interesting. Who you got on for this one?
This is a really good one. And also prayers and shout outs to all those Florida schools that survived Hurricane Idalia. I heard it got really messy down there. We've been covering that all month. FAMU had to close down their school. So I'm glad they got that win coming off of that. I think Savannah State is actually really good this year. And I have hope for them. I think I'm going to be wrong maybe, but I'm going to go with Savannah State. I think Savannah State might actually outdo Bethune-Cookman.
I think Savannah State too. Like I saw Savannah State's potential with my own eyes when I saw them beat Fort Valley. last year and ruin our playoff hopes. We're going to make the playoffs if we won that game. So, like Savannah State, to me, especially if Adams is the starting quarterback, I think that Savannah State is going to be just fine because he is an adept runner, and I think he's going to grow as a passer. And I think that Savannah State is going to be dangerous when it comes to the SIEC. So I'm picking Savannah State for that one. So Alabama State versus Miles, another interesting one. So I'm picking Alabama State for this one. I think Miles will be competitive, but I'm picking Alabama State. Who are you picking for this one?
I think this may be a close game just because Alabama State was very, very lucky with Southern this time, but I think Alabama State will pull out with this win.
Me too. I definitely think there's going to be a close game because Miles plays them close. But I think Alabama State ultimately wins. And I think Miles will come back with a little bit more fire in the years to come because they're still rebuilding from Reginald Ruffin leaving. So Alabama A&M versus Lane. So I'll lead on this one. Lane, I really like Lane, and they had some great wins last year, but they struggled. They played Miles this past weekend. I don't think they beat A&M. I think A&M wins this one handily.
I think A&M, this may be one of the wins that they need to take, build up some momentum, build up some pride. That would be really good for them. Alabama A&M will take on Lane.
So let's talk about FCS versus FBS. We know that these games always happen at the start of the season. So let's go on and get into it. We're going to try to get this really quickly. So LSU versus Grambling. Clearly LSU, right?
Yeah, a little battle in the bayou. We love a good down and dirty South game, but LSU is toppling Grambling, no questions asked.
So we can agree South Carolina State, Georgia Tech is gonna destroy them, right?
Yeah, Georgia Tech actually looked good this past weekend. Shout out to them. They looked really, really nice. Georgia Tech is definitely taking on that one.
And then imagine this, they're gonna look even better when they play South Carolina State. It's a shame. All right. They gonna look like national championship contenders, college football playoff against South Carolina State because they're struggling right now. Anyway, so Stephen F. Austin versus Alcorn. I got Alcorn for this one. So who you got for this one?
I don't even know what Stephen F. Austin is. I don't even want to do that to Alcorn, but like, if I had to pick, since I don't know who they are, Alcorn, you get my vote. That's just because I got to see what this team is working with. I'm sorry, Stephen F. Austin. I really am. So many football teams, so many schools. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like they're in the FBS, and they did beat Alcorn last year. And, the SWAC has not won an FBS game since, I think the 1980s when Eddie Robinson was coaching. No shade to them, but I'm just saying it's just the truth. So I think that Alcorn can break through. I like how they performed against Stephen F. Austin. Then that next week they beat McNeese State, which is, typically a really good FCS team. So I think that Alcorn is going to win this game. If they don't win this game, it'll definitely be close. So Prairie View A&M versus Abilene Christian. I think that Prairie View is going to win this game because they were competitive with them last year. They only lost 21-13, so it wasn't a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. And then after the win, you talked about it, after that upset win over Texas Southern in the Labor Day Classic, where they came back and won on Andrew Body and Texas Southern, I think they're going to be amped up and they want to prove that they're still a contender in the West. So I think that Prairie View A&M wins this game in the upset of the weekend.
Yeah, they're going to have my vote too. That was an incredible game that they played against Texas Southern, and they're going to carry that momentum into this week. So Prairie View for the win, and congratulations to them because I didn't think that was even possible. They were my pick last week, but that was an amazing game.
So Toledo versus Texas Southern. I have Toledo. I would have picked Texas Southern if they won this week to do an upset, but I think that Toledo has this game handily. What you got, Arielle?
I don't know. I think Texas Southern might show us what they were supposed to show us last week against. It wasn't a bad game, but it Prairie View was not supposed to win that. But I think Texas Southern is still dominating enough, especially with that defense, that they might put on a game for Toledo, given Texas Southern.
Fair enough. So Akron versus Morgan State. So Akron is where LeBron James is from, not the college, but the city. All right. So Akron, listen, I'm picking Morgan State for this one because gotta look at it like this. Akron was 2-10 last year, 1-7 in conference, and they just lost in week 1 a heartbreaking 24-21 game against Temple. So I don't think they're gonna be like, oh, we're gonna beat this HBCU. I think Morgan State's like, well, we beat Richmond. Let's beat y'all too. Let's really go into the MEAC play and make it interesting. So I think that Morgan State wins this game. I think it's going to be competitive, but I think Morgan State wins this game as well. And we're going to look at them real different come week 3.
I mean, getting that close to Temple within itself is an accomplishment. Temple is a really tough school when you're battling them during the football season. But Morgan State, that upset win against Richmond just has me so hopeful for them. And I would love if they stayed in my top three and see how much more they could give me. I'm going to have to go to Morgan State on this one as well.
So Arielle, so Delaware State versus Army. So Delaware State lost to Bowie on last week. And of course, the D2 guy was happy about that. But I think that says a lot about Delaware State because they did not look dominant at all. So I think they're going to go against Army and they're going to lose. It's going to be just like that. So Arielle, what you think?
It's Army. That's all I have to say. It's Army. Come on now. I mean, this is not Delaware State is taking hit after hit after hit. They just lost their last game. I hate this for them. But I see no hope in sight not in the near future. And it's really bad that they're getting this schedule that's blowing their confidence. But Army is taking this game all the way.
All right. So the last FBS versus FCS game for HBCUs is Florida A&M, FAMU, who just won today to start the season versus the University of South Florida. Not gonna lie, I'm picking FAMU. I think that this can be an upset, but I don't even think it'll be the biggest upset. I think Prairie View beating Abilene Christian might be the bigger upset because FAMU looked really great to me on today. And I just think that FAMU is gonna have a really good season. And I think that this could be their 2016 Grambling. They either beat them or it's 2016 Grambling where they get close, they catch a lead, but then South Florida just powers themselves to the win. So I think that FAMU has this game locked up. What do you think, Arielle?
These are actually really two good teams. South Florida, they've had a really good football team for the past 2 years, not necessarily competitively with all these other colleges, but they are one of those sneaky good teams where just a matter of seconds, any player on that team could become the star player and start winning their game for them. But Florida A&M, what we saw today, is undeniable that you can't tell me or anybody that they don't have a chance. But out of these two, I'm actually hopeful that Florida A&M is actually going to win this. Like, it seems possible now. Like, if this game didn't change your mind, and if last year didn't change your mind how close they were, I think this year they actually, if they beat USF, that's some attention on HBCUs just everywhere. That game by itself, and including the Prairie View game as well. But if Florida A&M beats University of South Florida, that's going to create some talk within the sports world. So I'm hoping that FAMU just pulls it out. That would be I would love to see them win this game.
Yeah, so I definitely feel the same way. I think FAMU is legit. I'm telling you, I think FAMU is legit, and we're gonna see really what happens. I'm excited to see what happens on next week. Football is back. So listen, I'm just excited. FAMU, don't let us down. So listen, like we only have like one delineation so far. So like let's see what we're gonna do with these HBCU versus HBCU matchups. So we only have two in Division One. So we have the Southern Heritage Classic, UAPB versus Tennessee State. And that's going to be on HBCU Go. So who you got for this one? I got Tennessee State, but UAPB might make it interesting based on what I saw from them. They had a great game on last week. Like they really went out there and competed with an FBS team. So I think that Tennessee State, they have something to prove because Eddie George is make or break for Eddie George. And I want to make sure he maintains his job. So he has to win this Southern Heritage Classic. And I think that there's no reason why he can't.
I want to have hope that Tennessee State pulls out. The University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. If people do not know the UAPB, that's who they are. Do not get them confused with any other team. They're the least dominating team that we've seen in a minute. There's not a lot of talk about them, especially from these past 2 seasons. They haven't shown us anything good. But Tennessee State always has high hopes and seems to disappoint me every single time. There's nothing that I feel like they have accomplished with Eddie George being there. That I just feel like I've seen him make accomplishments when it comes to playing different teams in his conference and making sure everybody's good with scholarships and promotions. But it's much more than the great migration of old NFL players or old greats coming to HBCUs. The whole purpose of that is to make them look good and to make them better players and to make them competitive enough to even play these other teams. So in those things, and in that regard, I haven't seen Tennessee State do, but I am going to pick them because I want to be wrong. I want to see some kind of improvement from last year. And like you said, I don't need anybody else losing their jobs. So he's going to have to prove to us in this game. This should be easy game that they win. It should. This is like here you go. Here's the W. Take it. This is one of those games. If they cannot do that, his job might be in trouble, Randall. I'm just saying. Like, you have to win against Arkansas Pine Bluff. Like, this is literally the easiest win that you're ever going to get in this season.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it's going to be a competitive matchup because Pine Bluff looked good. Like, they were leading against the FBS team. So I'm just saying, like, I don't think, like, it's probably very well, like, in all honesty, going to be a blowout and Tennessee State just beats them, but I think that the best indication to go off of based off the information that we have is that Pine Bluff can be competitive against Tennessee State. So we're going to see on that one. So, hopefully Tennessee State does win because, like I said, we want Eddie Joyce to keep his job. I think as a coach in general, not the wins-loss side, but as an ambassador, for Tennessee State, I think that he's been amazing. He just needs to put the win portion together so he can, maintain his position, to be honest. Yeah. So last game, we're going to talk about Hampton versus Norfolk. So I'm picking Hampton. Hampton, they were scoring like crazy against Grambling. And Norfolk has not really been doing all that great. They just lost last week to Virginia State. And it was some low IQ plays. I'm not gonna lie. I'm talking about low IQ. I mean low sports IQ, low football IQ. We call plays high IQ plays, low IQ plays. I'm not saying nobody, is bad and nothing like that. I'm just saying that they made some mistakes that were costly that whole entire game, but especially in those last few possessions of the game. So I think that Dawson Odoms, he's on the hot seat a little bit. So I honestly think that Norfolk is going to lose this game. And now the Norfolk State crew, they're going to be like, Dawson Odoms, like, what you doing? This ain't the Southern Dawson Odoms. This is a new Dawson Odoms. Like, what we doing here? So I think that Hampton's going to win this game and head to the CAA 2-0.
You know what? I'm saying Norfolk only because they may come back and do a little sneaky 2-on-2 right there and start scoring some points and end up having a close game where they might win by a field goal. Not a touchdown because Hampton is pretty tough this year, but a field goal. So Norfolk is one of those sneaky teams. So they have my vote only on the basis of I think that they might have something in there. Now, if they lose after this, I'm sorry. I tried to help them out. But I just feel like this game, we shouldn't sleep on it too much.
All right, so that's it for week 1, Arielle. We have a lot more weeks to go. It's a lot of football to watch, a lot of football to talk about. So, Arielle, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram at __.marterdayari, or go ahead and hit me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @axriri__, or you can visit my website at theunackedopinion.weebly.com.
Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to hbcupulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.